Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me share a quote with you. The great Les Brown once said, "You can't see the picture when you're in the frame." If you felt stuck in your fitness, mindset, or life as a whole, head down to the link in the show notes and reach out to learn more about Project Endure Coaching so that we can help you step outside of the frame and bridge the gap between who you are now and who you want to be. We can't wait to hear from you. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 116. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very, very special guest in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, Enjoli Segneri. Anj, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I am so good. I've been looking forward to this conversation all day. You have such a bright, vibrant energy about you. And
Oh,
I would love to start off if you could introduce yourself to the audience. And then at the end of that, maybe share why you're so bright and vibrant all the time.
great. So I don't know. I guess I'm bright and vibrant all the time because why not be? Like it's so much easier to be bright and vibrant. And you have to think too, your energy passes on to other people. And I want people to leave me feeling that same happiness. I never want to leave somebody not being in a good mood. So even if someone is grouchy towards me, I do my very best to stay that bright, cheerful self. That way it can pass it on. So that's why.
Okay. Well, I can respect that. And I think I share
Yeah.
I share some of that. And you're right. It's definitely not easy at times with certain
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
But why don't we go with a general introduction? Tell the people who you are, where you're from, what you're about, whatever comes
Oh
to
yeah.
mind.
Yeah, so I'm Enjoli. Everybody calls me Anj because my name is spelled funny. I originally grew up in Hershey, Pennsylvania, sweetest place on earth. And then I've been in and out of the King of Prussia area since about the year 2001. I kind of bounced around this area, lived in Colorado for a while, lived in Florida for a while, New Jersey, kind of stretched my feelers, and then realized that this area is my home. And then I'm here by myself. My entire family is in Hershey, and I'm close enough, but far away enough. So this is my home.
That's awesome. So I'd love to start with just a general summary, if you will, of maybe childhood. And let's get through, okay, the day you were born until when you entered adulthood. And then we'll really dive into stuff from there.
I love it. Okay. My birthday's in September. I'm a Libra through and through. So, yeah, I am the third child. So I'm the baby of the family. I'm the third child of my father, and then the second child of my mother. So I have a half brother. He's about 7 years older than I am. Um, but anytime someone hears me say my brother, I'm not actually referring to him. I'm referring to someone else who's very near and dear to my heart. So that'll come later. But my sister and I, we're 13 months apart. We are like thicker than thieves. Typical kind of sisters. We fight, we love each other. We're very Italian, so we love hard and we fight harder. So yeah, but at the end of the day, she's my rock. We grew up dancing. I started dancing competitively when I was 3 years old. Beauty pageants. I have trophies that were taller than me when I was a child. So picture like, I don't know if anyone knows who JonBenet Ramsey is, but like that was me, beauty queen, petticoats. And this was in the 80s. So just picture all of that together. Poofy hair, just wild. So I grew up with that like competitiveness in me. Going back to my real older brother, he like I idolized him. He was a bodybuilder growing up. And I grew up going to all of his bodybuilding shows. And then my sister ended up becoming a bikini model. And then I ended up competing in bodybuilding as well. So just kind of following my big brother's footsteps. And then, yeah, I guess bringing into adulthood, I kind of was a taste tester when it came to like what I wanted to do with my life. Everyone's always shocked. They say, "Oh, I used to work there. Oh, I used to do this. Oh, I used to do that." I would just kind of taste test. I've always been very outgoing, and that's how I kind of landed in the sales world. So anything related to sales is something that I've done. However, I went to art school. I have an art degree. I know you can see it behind me, but that's one of my paintings. So yeah, I went to art school. I used my degree for a hot minute. And then just kind of ended up going back into sales. That's where I thrive. And I was a personal trainer, still am. I have a few clients that I do one-on-one on the side, but I'm not actively like in a gym anywhere. But I am a personal trainer. That is kind of my side passion. So, anytime you make something your job, you stop and like you lose interest in it. So I keep that on the side. But yeah, that kind of brings me into adulthood. Kind of, yeah.
Do you sleep?
Not really. I wake up at like 4:30 in the morning. So,
Yeah. So, okay, you've done a whole lot of different things. And
yeah.
the one thing you kept coming back to was sales. I think for a lot of people, sales is scary, sales is unappealing, sales is uncomfortable. Why do you think you've been drawn to sales?
I think it's what I love. I love connecting with people. I always said that I should have started like some kind of networking business because that is like my heart and soul is just connecting with people. I make best friends with everyone that I meet. I love to find out their background story. I love to find out what we have in common.
Mm.
And it's just like a natural ability. And that just goes relationship building just goes hand in hand when it comes to sales. Because you have to like have someone's trust. And I'm very genuine about it. Like I'm not like a fake salesy pushy person. So I think it just comes very naturally to me. That's what fills my cup. Getting that relationship, hearing those people's stories, getting those connections, that's what makes me feel good after I give, that fills me up. Um, and yes, it is very scary because a lot of sales, it's like a roller coaster when it comes to your paycheck. Which is kind of why now I'm in retail because it's a little more steady, a little more predictable. So yeah, so that's why sales, because that relationship building is what fills me up. I love bringing like groups of friends that don't know each other together. Like I planned like a girls' day and there were like 12 of us and maybe 3 people knew each other. So I love, bringing people together.
You and I share the love for connection and for relationship building. And just today, I had a past client and good friend of mine reach out. He's a new dad and he's working on this project and he wants to talk to other dads about parenthood. And he asked me if I had anybody, and I was able to connect him with 4 or 5, 6 other guys within a matter of minutes because I just have this network of people that I've built relationships with. And it fills my cup so much to be able to make connections and say like, "Hey, dude, this is another awesome man and you guys should talk and I know you would hit it off." And that fills me up so much. And so with that being said, I think a big part of connection is shared vulnerability, is shared depth of conversation and not shying away from the hard things, which is one of the reasons I love this podcast so much because it allows me and hopefully the audience in just 60 minutes to connect with somebody on a deep level. And with that being said, I know the background of what you're going to talk about. And I would warn anybody listening that it could be maybe a bit triggering. It's definitely heavy, but I'll ask you this question and I'll let you run with it. When you look back at your life so far, what is the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle that you did not get to choose for yourself?
Yeah. You're gonna make me cry.
It's okay.
This situation that um letting go of how I thought my life was gonna be. That's still today. So the end of August, it'll mark 7 years. And 7 years later, I still kind of struggle with this isn't how it was supposed to be, like that little thought in my head. So yeah, that the hardest thing I had to do was let go of what I thought my life was gonna be like.
So I think that is relatable for anybody listening to this podcast. The specific context of what you're talking about is unique to you in some ways and also relatable to some. But take us back to 7 years ago, or even further back if that's where this starts. And if you
Yeah.
could just walk us through, right? How did you come to this place of thinking your life was going to look one way? And what was it like to find out, to realize that it wasn't going to look like that?
Yeah. Okay, so we will go way back. We're going to go back to 1994. I was 12, going to be 13, starting seventh grade, and I met this kid named Shane. We became best friends. We were shop class partners. We were in all these classes together, and we were best friends. He had a little crush on me, but it was not mutual. But we just really, really like cared about each other all through middle school, high school, everything. So we did date when we were younger, then it didn't work out, and then, everyone kinda goes their separate ways. We always referred to ourselves as Forrest Gump and Jenny, like, so if you're familiar with the movie, they're together, peas and carrots, and then they go their separate ways, but they always find their way back to each other, and that is exactly how he and I were. Um, I moved all around the place, he always stayed kind of in the local Hershey area, but we always found our way back to each other. Fast forwarding to about 2008, we reconnected again, did the whole dating thing, didn't work again. It was like we were both at like weird spots. Then somehow back in 2010, like glue. Once it started, we were in. Like this was it. I specifically remember um, we called it our third first date. So I remember sitting there and just having dinner with him, and it just clicked in my head. I was like, this person is my soulmate. Like, this is who I am going to spend the rest of my life with. I just knew it sitting there. I felt it deep down inside, like this was it. Um, so yeah, we were together. We moved all over the place together. Um, he ran a gym in Harrisburg, so I moved to Harrisburg, kind of gave up everything that I had here, and then we had a very, like, tumultuous journey on our own, like, without kind of, everything else that happened. Um his brother, who is now my brother, so when I say my brother now, I'm talking about his brother, Matt. His brother had a lot of hardships happen. Um, we went through a bunch of stuff with him, and we decided we were gonna move to New Jersey to be closer to his brother, to help him with what he was going through. And we sold our house, and about 2 weeks before we moved, the company that Shane was working for in New Jersey got flooded by hurricane. It wasn't Sandy, I forget what hurricane it was. Anyway, got flooded out and went bankrupt and closed. So he lost his job in New Jersey, and we were settling on our house in 1 week. So we were like, "Well, now what do we do?" And we kinda just we thought, "Well, this is a fresh start. Everything happens for a reason. Let's figure it out." So we moved to Florida. down in Florida. He ended up buying into an existing nutrition store that was already there. It was down in Boca Raton. So he became half owner of this nutrition store. That's where I found my dog too, by the way. So he became half owner with this nutrition store. The business partner was a little, things didn't really work out, but that's where he found his passion. Shane was like, this is what I want to do. I want to own a nutrition store. It's lucrative. I'm good at it. So we ended up moving back to the Philadelphia area, and he opened a store in Westchester, Pennsylvania. So, when you're in love with somebody, there's always like a curtain over your face. Like, you're not really sure what this means. You just know something's wrong. And throughout our relationship, it had always been a little touchy. I'm going to say Jekyll and Hyde-ish, where, sometimes everything would be absolutely perfect, but then there were instances where things were just off. It was like I didn't know who I was going to deal with at certain times. Like, he had this personality switch. And once he opened his store in Westchester, it became a little bit more drastic. It became a little bit more noticeable, where it was like everything would kind of trigger him to get angry. And even though I know that he loved me with his entire heart, it started to feel like things were falling apart. And we had this plan of owning this store in Westchester, opening another one in King of Prussia in like 2 years, doing this, having children together. Like, we had this entire plan. I was a real estate agent at the time because it allowed me the freedom to help him with his goal. But everything just started to feel like it was falling apart. And back, I'm going to say 2015, it was February. We had gotten into this huge fight, just like a huge explosive fight. And something in him just snapped. Like, it was not him at all. I didn't recognize who this person was. He ended up like getting physical with me to the point where I was afraid for my life. And I was just like, what the hell is happening? And at one point I was literally sitting there and I was like, he's going to kill me. Like, this is it. This person is going to kill me. And something clicked. He backed off. I grabbed my dog and I left. I left our house and I was like, this is wild. I don't know what's happening. And he actually sent me an email, because I would not go back home. I wouldn't go back home. I wouldn't answer his calls. Like, I was just ignoring him. And he sent me an email, and in that email, he admitted to me that he was using heroin. And I remember reading that email, and I was like, this isn't real. Like, this isn't real. Because that's a big word. Like, that's a really big word. And I was like, first of all, makes sense. Second of all, how did I not know? And third of all, well, now what do we do? Because that's like, it was wild to me. Like, I don't even know, but I just remember feeling this just like shock in my heart that like, this is not going to be easy. So he spent a week going through detox on his own. So this was a very private thing between the two of us. He went through detox on his own. I watched his store for him, and it was kind of rough. It was like he felt like he had the flu. He was very emotionally up and down. He was calling me all day, crying. It was just like a release. Like it was crazy. It's funny, like when he was detoxing, anything that he said when he was detoxing is what I hold very true in my heart, because I know that he was being honest with me, because that was like the purest form of him. So that happened, and he was good. Like he was getting up early. He was like really motivated, back to kind of the old Shane that I had known previously. And it was fantastic. That lasted maybe 2 weeks, if that. And I asked him, called him right out on it. Of course, the lies, like I lying about it, saying, no, I'm just stressed out about the store. And then I'm like, all right, well, that makes sense. He also had a lot of other stuff going on. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like, he's just stressed out. I'll let it go. But deep down in my heart, I knew I was lying to myself, because I didn't want to believe my dream was also falling apart. His dream was falling apart. Mine was too. And I didn't want to believe it. So I just held on to that hope that, like, okay, maybe it is just stress. Maybe he will stop. Then around May of that same year, so 2015, again, we got into this huge explosive fight. And he openly admitted to me that he purposely was trying to overdose to kill himself. And this entire rush of emotion comes where, like, I felt guilty, because what did I do to make him want to use drugs like this? And, you feel helpless, because it's like, what can I do? So I gave him an ultimatum. I'm going to sideline. There's a man that I was working with when I was a real estate agent. His name is Ed Fordyce. He's an amazing human being. He helped me through this entire situation. And I gave Shane an ultimatum, and I said, you either get help or I am calling your parents. I don't know what to do. Like, we can't do this by ourselves. So I said, if anything, call Ed. Ed shopped at his store. He was really big into CrossFit. Ed knew what we had gone through in February. So I was like, you can trust him. If anything, call him. But you have till 5 o'clock tonight, or I'm calling your parents and I'm telling them what's going on. So he ended up calling Ed. He also ended up calling his brother, who was an FBI agent, by the way. He ended up calling his parents and doing everything on his own. And he didn't get professional help at the time. Like, he didn't go to like a facility or anything. He did start going to NA meetings, like locally in Westchester. And I was like, this is great. We got it. We're good. We're good. So all that happened, and I remember his mom came to visit. And mind you, I've known this family since I was 12. So, like, we're all very close. So his mom came to visit, and we were driving in the car, and she said, Anj, if it happens again, you leave. Like, you leave him. And I'm like, why would she tell me to abandon her son? I just thought it was so bizarre. And I was like, I'm not going to leave him. Like, I love him. He's my life. He's my future. So I was also like, he was fighting for his life. I was fighting for our lives. So again, I don't even remember how long it lasted. Maybe a month, if that. The switch happened again. Started like, every once in a while he would like complain about being sick. And in hindsight, like thinking back on it, he was detoxing. Every once in a while he would put himself through detox. Just kind of like, I'm like, oh, well, now that makes sense. So I ended up finding out probably like around June of 2015. His store had no money. We almost got evicted from our apartment because he wasn't paying like I was paying him and he wasn't paying the rent. His store was struggling, and we made a plan. Like, we made a plan. My friend always says, like, you're insane. Like, why would you do this? But we made this plan. We were going to leave our apartment. We got out of our lease. We were going to leave our apartment, move into the back room of his store until we could find a new place. The back room, there was a little bathroom. There was no shower. It was a room. It was one giant room in the back room of his store. And that's where we were going to live until, we could figure things out. And, the whole time I'm sitting there and I was like, where's his money going? Completely naive to what had just happened a month before. But again, I had blinders on. And so finally, again, it comes out like, well, he had no money. He decided he was going to move back to Hershey to be with his parents, close the store. And he told me, this was July of 2015. He said, I don't want you to come with me. And that was a knife in my heart. Like, here I am throwing away my life for you, and now you're throwing me away. At the time, that's how it felt. Like, you're throwing me away. Like, I'm your only hope in this world right now, and you're going to get rid of me. So anger, nothing but anger, bitterness. Like, I just thought, this is ridiculous. Like, I should be the one throwing you away, not vice versa. So I ended up moving to King of Prussia. He moved to Hershey. And we didn't really talk for a while. I know he moved back in with his parents. He was an electrician by trade, and we didn't talk for a while. And then Halloween weekend, 2015, he called me like hysterical because he had wrecked his mom's car into the side of his house. And he admitted that he was again trying to kill himself. And I dropped everything and I ran. I dropped everything I was doing and I drove back to Hershey. His mom had told me that he checked into the psychiatric ward of the local hospital. So I dropped everything and I went and I sat with him, like, immediately. And going back to the purest form of Shane that I've ever seen. He was there overnight, and he was telling me how I'm his saving grace. He's going to do this for our little family, meaning myself and my dog. And he was really, really fighting to be clean. He knew that this was the path that he needed to take. He was doing it for us. He wanted us to be together again. And I just sat with him for as long as visiting hours were. He was there for 3 days. It was 72 hours. And every single second that I could spend with him, I spent with him. And I remember he told me he was going to like a therapist there. And the person had asked if I do drugs. And he said, absolutely not. And like, not to like think that I'm better than anybody, but I don't even smoke cigarettes. Like, I barely drink alcohol. So, he was like, absolutely not. Like, she's an angel. She's my saving grace. He just saving grace all the time. I'm his saving grace. So he got out of the hospital and we arranged that the following weekend, I was going to pick him up, bring him to Westchester so he could see like his old little NA meeting group. And then he was going to ride the train back to Harrisburg. So I went to pick him up. Now, mind you, this is a week. 1 week had passed since he was in the hospital. And I picked him up the second he got into my car. And I was like, I know he's using drugs. I know he is. That antsy, like kind of like anxiousness. I knew he was using drugs. By that time, I had hired a coach to compete in bodybuilding because it's something that I always wanted to do because we were like in the fitness industry. And driving to Philadelphia from Hershey, I was telling him about it, and he got so angry, so angry. And he was like, "Don't you think you should be focusing on other things rather than spending your money on a coach?" And for the first time ever to him, I had no intention of being nice and trying to salvage our relationship. Because anytime like we would fight, I would always like have this, I got to be careful what I say. Don't say anything you regret because I want to stay with this person. But at that point, I ended it. And I literally said to him, "Who are you to judge anyone's life decisions?" So I dropped him off at his meeting. And then the next day he had called me. I'm sorry if this is getting long. He called me and said the guy that he stayed with won't, he's like, Jeremy won't let me stay at his apartment because he's leaving for work. I have nowhere else to go. Which meant to me, Jeremy knows. Jeremy does not trust you to stay in his apartment while he's not here. So I met him at Starbucks in Westchester, and we sat there and we talked. And we both agreed that until he's on the right track for a significant amount of time, we can't do this. Like, we just can't. And then I dropped him off at the train station, and it was November 4th. I dropped him off at the train station, and we sat and we talked in the car some more about like kind of our future plan. Like, he was going to do this. He was going to, he was going to focus on doing this and, getting clean. And then we would revisit everything because we loved each other so much. And then we saw a train pull up, and it was just like, "Oh, that's your train. You got to go." And he got out of my car and he went to the train station, and no hug, no anything. And as I was leaving the train station, I felt it inside of me. I was like, that's the last time I'm going to see him. I knew it. I knew that was the last time I was going to physically see him alive. So fast forward, we didn't really speak for a while. I would send emails. We would email back and forth. I would send him pictures of our dog. I kept in touch with his family. He was very close with one of his cousins, and she and I remained close. I kept in touch with his parents. I kept in touch with his brother. He and I just never kept in touch. It was kind of one of those things where we knew like we just couldn't. And then August 28th, 2016, his aunt called me and said, "We lost our buddy." And in true Hollywood dramatic fashion, I ran out of the door, threw myself on my driveway, and just bawled my eyes out. Like, I knew that phone call was going to come. You're just never prepared for it. So that was the worst day of my life right there. That's the worst feeling I think I've ever had. Part of my soul was like ripped out of my chest. So, as like news trickled in of like, because you get the initial information, and just this horror goes through my head. Like, the cops went to his parents' door and said they found him, and I was like, they found him. I was like, cops don't find people sitting on their couch. I was like, he was probably on the street. So this nightmare just like came into my head, and I went into widow mode. I started calling all of our friends. Um, and I was just like, I like was like a robot almost, like not really processing what was happening and just focusing on, I need to tell everybody what happened. Um, and I just kept thinking like they found him, and this thought of him just being found on the side of the road or something like that, was just, it was devastating. Then I found out like afterwards that he was in a house, that he was staying with people and he was in a house, and that's what had happened. Um, but yeah, I went into like widow mode, and at the funeral, like, it was everybody that we had ever known. Um, it was wild. People from like elementary school, high school. I was in the receiving line with the family. And even though we weren't together at the time, we were always together, if that makes any sense whatsoever. I don't know if people can understand that. Like, I never once referred to him as my ex-boyfriend. He was always my former boyfriend. Um, there was always this plan, no matter what, that he was going to get better and we were going to be together and everything was just going to be okay. So that day, even though we hadn't been together, that was the day that my little dream just completely fell apart. Even though I had been working on this other kind of journey in my life, like I was still doing the real estate thing, um, and I had that going for me. That wasn't what I wanted to do ever. That wasn't the end all be all. I became a real estate agent because it was convenient to help him. So now that like he was physically gone, when I tell you, I can feel that part of my soul is gone. Um, and I just had to like figure out like, well, now what do you do? Like, I was in the middle of contest prep as well during all that. So what I did was I spent 3 hours at the gym every day. I usually went twice a day. Um, I just poured myself into I avoided my emotions by pouring everything into training to compete. And every day, like you have like a little motto, like I would always say, I am the storm. I wrote it on everything. I am the storm. I am the storm. Because I'm sure you're familiar with that phrase, like the devil whispered to the warrior. So I wrote that on everything. And then I also always said, like, my mantra was, I'm going to win you a sword. So in a bodybuilding competition, you win first place, and then everybody in that category that wins first place competes against each other. First place out of first place is called the overall, and the trophy for the overall was a sword. So every day, I'm going to win you a sword. I wasn't winning myself a sword. I was doing this for Shane because I got into that industry because of him. He was a trainer, he owned a nutrition store, he was a bodybuilder. Everything that I put into my training was what I learned from him. And so this was for him. And that is 100% what got me on that stage. I remember I would on the stair mill, I would be on there for an hour and I would just be sobbing, like sobbing. And that was my escape. That was my release of like fighting through it. And I won my sword. And I felt nothing. I was like, "Well, this didn't
Mm.
help." Like, it didn't help at all, and I was like, I had a mental breakdown, like, and I won my sword, and it didn't help. So, I had to try and figure out, "Okay, now what do I do?" And I just kept, again, taste testing. "Alright, well, fitness industry, this feels right." Um, so I started working for a supplement company, and I always thought it was weird. I would I became friends with like professional bodybuilders, because I was always at these shows. I was always involved in this stuff. I would hand out trophies on stage. So I was like bumping elbows with all these like people who Shane idolized. And I remember every time I would just sit there and I would think like, he's with me. This is our dream, just modified. I modified our dream. I'm still in the supplement industry. I'm still in the like the bodybuilding fitness world. It just tweaked. It's just tweaked a little bit. And I remember his favorite bodybuilder, it's this guy, Jay Cutler, not the football player. I worked for Jay Cutler. He was my boss. And I remember telling Jay Cutler, I was like, I have an autographed picture from you to Shane, and we had it hanging on our wall forever, you know? And like I told him the whole story about what had happened, and he was like in shock. He's like, how crazy is it full circle? And now like I'm standing here and I'm like, he's probably so jealous. Like Jay Cutler would like kiss me on the cheek. And I was like, he's probably so jealous of me. But I just thought like what a great way to kind of honor our dream and like move on from that, and still do what we kind of wanted to do. But that being said and done, I don't do that anymore. So that, then, I became a trainer. I don't really do that anymore. Now I'm doing this. So now I'm realizing, all right, his dream isn't my dream. That's not going to happen anymore. Probably never going to have children. Probably, you know what I mean? Might get married, my whole world is like completely just changed from what I thought it was going to be. Um, I, not to bring it up, one of the questions that you asked is, something about the question, like, what's the hardest question anyone's asked you? What's my 5-year plan? I don't have an answer. Like, I really don't have an answer because I had a 5-year plan, and without doing anything, it got destroyed. So pretty much I just keep pushing through, and I know like what is the point of like I'm not honoring anybody, I'm not helping anybody by sitting on my ass and crying and being sad. So every single day I'm like, all right, just figure it out. Figure it out. But it is kind of a roller coaster. Anytime something bad happens, I do go back to this isn't what it was supposed to be like. This is awful. This isn't what it's supposed to be like. Shane left me. He chose drugs over me. It's that whole like cycle, and it never goes away. 7 years later, it doesn't go away. It's a lot easier to talk about. Like I don't get emotional really when I talk about it. Um, but it's still there. Like it still hurts. There's still a part of me missing. Um, yeah, so that's pretty much it. Now we're here. And I talk about it so openly because I do believe like addiction, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care how old you are. It doesn't care what color you are. It doesn't care what sex you are. It doesn't care how much money you make. Um, Everyone thought Shane was in a car accident. Nobody even knew he was taking drugs. So I think it's very important to talk about that. I also think it's very important to continue his legacy and like tell everybody what an amazing person he was. He would have given you the shirt off his back if he had to. So I kind of like to keep him alive in that aspect. And that's why I continue to talk about my story. Like everyone knows who Shane is. Even people I just met yesterday, they know who Shane is. Yeah. So that kind of brings us to today, just kind of staying focused and knowing like all of their feelings, this too shall pass. The good, the bad, everything, nothing's permanent. So just keep pushing forward.
Anj, I mean, first and foremost, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a couple things that come to mind. In the format of the podcast, I usually ask, "What's the hardest thing you've ever had to handle?" And then I'll follow that up with, "And what's the hardest thing you've ever done on purpose?" And it almost sounds like the whole story is both of those things. Having what you thought was supposed to happen get ripped away from you, and then striving one foot in front of the other to figure out how to move forward is the choice that you're making. And that sounds like probably the hardest series of steps that you've taken in life and continue to take. And there are a few quotes that come to mind. One is actually from Keanu Reeves. And he said, grief changes shape, but it never ends.
Yeah.
And then another quote, I'm not sure who said this one, grief is the price we pay for love. And obviously, in the beginning, you said you love hard. You're Italian. I'm Italian. I get it.
Yeah.
But that comes at the risk of loss. And you mentioned this phrase, everything happens for a reason. And you mentioned it, there was no context around it, but I want to put context to it. And I want to ask a pointed question. When you think about the phrase, everything happens for a reason, can you make sense of what happened with Shane and how your life has unfolded to this point and still see that phrase as true?
Yeah. So I think it comes in little moments. Like I'll rewind to him leaving me and saying, I don't want you to come with me. That kid saved my life. By leaving me behind, he saved my life. Took me a while to figure it out. That's what happened. He saved my life. And he never left me. He never stopped. His friends always told me he never stopped talking about me. He knew that I had competed before, like, and he was proud of me. He knew that the way he was, I would never take him back. So he knew he was saving my life. Um, so yes, I still 100% believe that. I believe, um, I believe that I always say find the gift. Find the gift in what has happened. And that's the reason, basically. It's just like a different variation of that phrase. You might not find it right away. I still think I'm not really there yet. I know I'm going to get there. I know my journey is going to be somewhere. And maybe the reason is, you know, could be me talking about it all the time helps somebody else. Him going through that, and you know, it saved my life. I was addicted to him, he was addicted to heroin. Um, and he had to sacrifice himself in order for me to survive. So that's kind of the big picture of the why. Um, he was never gonna get better. Like I went to a psychic once. I know this is so weird, but she not knowing anything, she looked me dead in the eye and she said, "You know you couldn't save him." And I was like, "Yeah." And it's so true, and it's something that I struggle with. You carry this it's a burden that I carry that I never asked for. It's a burden of guilt that I know isn't really mine. Like, I know I don't have anything to feel guilty about. I do, though. I feel guilty about a lot of things. Um, but yeah, I do believe that there's a gift in absolutely everything that happens. And I think my life continuing on is the gift that he gave me. So with that being said, I have to continue to move forward knowing I am supposed to be here. This is the way it's supposed to be. Because if it wasn't, I would have I would have ended up dying with him. Maybe not by like drugs, but we were ruining our lives and he cut me free. So yeah, I think that's the big why of it. But I still do believe in that
Yeah.
100%. I have faith.
I appreciate that perspective. And as you mentioned, you're moving forward and you might not be there yet, wherever there is. And that takes endurance to keep going, even when you're not sure where the finish line is or the destination. When you hear the word endurance, what comes to mind for you? What does that mean?
Yeah, it pretty much exactly what you said. Like, I don't know where this is gonna end up, because every turn I take, it seems to maybe not be the right one, but lead to something different, if that makes any sense. Like, this journey that I'm on, I don't know. I guess I really don't know. I keep going, just keep going. That's what you have to do. I know I have to pay my rent, so I have to go to work. So, but yeah, and then just making sure that every day that I do live and that I am here, no matter how it feels uncomfortable, like it's this uncomfortable feeling where it's just I'm not like in love with how things are right now. Like this is kind of I was like maybe this isn't the greatest time to do this podcast because right now I feel like I'm in a transition. I feel like I'm hitting some kind of like disappointing wall where it's like you're running, you're running, you're running, you're running, you're like, yes, this feels amazing. And then you trip and fall and you're like, ah. And I kind of feel like I'm in that kind of transition. And I just said something, I said this today to somebody, and I said, things aren't falling apart, they're falling together. Um, and I feel like that's literally, that just sums up my life where I'm like, well, that's not going to work out, but this is going to happen. So it's going to be fine, like kind of like a monkey swinging vines. Like, like you have to let go of what you thought was going to happen and move on to the next thing. And if that doesn't work, guess what? I know there's probably something else I can do. So that's like another thing. It's like, you know, this is, I've already survived the worst possible thing I can imagine happening to me. So anything that happens to me now is minuscule. It's that it's kind of that gauge where, the worst thing that happened to somebody might be like their dad didn't buy them the right car. That's their gauge. Like everyone has their struggle. It depends on the level. And like I don't like when people like compare problems.
Mhm.
You know, my brother, Shane's brother, I always look at him and I'm like, I would not trade my life for anything with you. Um, everyone puts their problems into a dish, they take their own back. But you can't, someone might think, oh, that's nothing compared to what you went through. But in your mind, it could be. In your life, it could be. And for me, the worst possible thing that ever happened to me, like I can't imagine something worse happening to me. So anything that comes along, I'm like, yeah, I got this. It's fine. I actually on my mirror, can I curse?
Oh
Am I allowed to
yeah, go
curse?
ahead.
Okay. On my mirror, I have my sword sitting next to my mirror. And on my mirror, it says, remember who the fuck you are. And it points, and there's an arrow pointing to my sword. And I'm like, yes, like that girl, that girl was dying every day, dying, struggling just to get out of bed, just to be alive. And look what I did, So if that girl can do it, this girl sure as hell can because I'm way stronger than that, That's endurance. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's endurance.
So I've got, man, just listening to you speak brings up so much on my end. So I'm going to try to keep this concise. I've got a couple quotes and then an analogy that is forming in my mind as I speak. So bear with me when I get there.
Yes.
So the first quote is from Najwa Zebian, who said, "These mountains that you are carrying, you were only supposed to climb." And I think for a lot of people listening, right, hard is relative. And sometimes things can feel extra hard for a certain season because we are carrying the mountains that we're only supposed to climb. And I think we need to let go of certain things in order to realize we need to put this mountain down and start to climb it instead. So that's one that might resonate with somebody listening. Two quotes that are somewhat related. This first one is on courage from Marianne Rodmacher. I think that's how you say her name. She said, "Courage is not always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow." And
Yes.
then another one, you'll like this one, Veronica Roth. Sometimes bravery is nothing more than gritting your teeth through pain and the work of every day, the slow walk toward a better life. That is the sort of bravery I must have now. And to your point of not knowing maybe where you're going and feeling like you hit a stride and all of a sudden you fall, I almost began to think about art. And you're an artist and you've got art on your wall behind you. I almost wonder if sometimes we think of life as we're trying to get to this place and we're moving and we're going up and down and we hit some resistance, we go right, left, twist, turn, whatever it is, trying to find this place. And maybe our life is nothing more than brushstrokes on a canvas and we can't escape the canvas. There's nowhere to go. We are just here experiencing it, and every trip and stumble and fall is just another brushstroke. And At the end of our life, we don't get a chance to step back and admire what we've created, but we do leave it behind and hang it on the wall of life for the people that come after us. And maybe we don't need to figure it out. Maybe we don't need to get to that place or achieve that thing. We just need to live and be ourselves and create that unique masterpiece. And maybe that's what life is. Maybe.
Yeah, I like that. I love that.
Thanks.
It's funny because I always compare myself to Vincent van Gogh, and I was like, I'll be famous when I die. Like someone will find all my paintings. So I like that because it's true. Like, you don't see the end result. And it might not be what you thought it was gonna be, as an artist, as a creative person, how many times I can't tell you how many unfinished paintings I have because I'm like, this doesn't look like what I thought it was. So I like that little analogy.
Thanks. That was an inside look into how Joe's brain works 24/7.
Yeah.
But with that
I
being
love it.
said, there are people listening to this all over the place in different seasons of life, going through different things. But the one tie that we all have together as human beings is that we struggle. We fight battles. Some are bigger than others, some are different than others, but hard is relative, and we're all going through something. If you get to speak right now to somebody who's just struggling, they're going through it, and they're not sure where they're going, they're not sure what to do, what would you say to them?
Even though it feels like you are alone and the only one who could possibly understand what you feel, I promise you, you're not. You're not alone. I promise you, moving forward is worth it. Um, and also just take one step at a time. You don't have to jump. You take one little step and progress is progress.
Mm.
But the most important thing, especially like mental health, you are never alone. Ever, ever, ever. Someone loves you, someone cares about you. Um, and even though you think, like I talk about this all the time, and I'm like, people don't want to hear about it. They're so sick of hearing about Shane. I don't care. I'm sure there's someone who's like, no, I'm glad you said that. That's how Kate Moser and I became friends. So, like, just you're never alone, basically. You're never alone.
It's a great message. So true. I've got to get Kate on the podcast. It's a good
I
reminder.
know. She and I talked about that.
I know. I'll get her. I'll get her.
Yeah.
And now before we wrap up, one thing for people listening, if anybody wants to go back and listen to an episode that maybe gives the other side of what it's like to be addicted to something while loving someone else or having someone else love you, episode 58 of this podcast with Kellen Matthews is a great listen. And so, Anj, to wrap up, if people want to connect with you, if they want to follow along with what you're doing, or just say thank you, where's the best place for people to do that?
Instagram is probably the best. It also gives a glimpse into my life. I'll spell it and then I'll say it. Well, I'll say it, then I'll spell it. It's Anji Ponji. It was my nickname growing up. So Enjoli Segneri, it's ENJIEPONJIE. So Enjoli Segneri.
I could have saved you from that. I'll link it in the description, but I'm
Oh,
so glad you said it out loud because that's amazing.
yeah.
And Anj, just thank you so much for sharing the story, for showing up every day, and to go back to the very beginning, just for being so bright and vibrant and encouraging and just the person you are. It speaks volumes to what we can go through in life and how we can come out the other side and still impact the world in such positive ways. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for giving me a platform to share my story.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.